Hello everybody. Probably a month ago I put out a video on how to ID a 289 Hypo, and it was only really pertaining to the heads. This time I'm going to try to go from top to bottom on a motor which happens to be a 1966 GT350 289, and I'm going to go top to bottom on that thing and show you all the little numbers that I can find on it and explain to you how I determine this is a 289 Hypo motor and how I know it comes out of a GT350 Mustang. And I'm also going to kind of discuss the differences, because there are three different versions of the 289 Hypo. They were produced from 1963 all the way to 1967. And so there are some variances there. There are the 271 horsepower 289 that were installed in K-code Mustangs, 2+2s, 65, 66. And then we've also got the Shelby version of the 289 Hypo. And there were some distinct differences between all the motors, but there's also a lot of commonalities. So I'm going to try to cover some of those similarities and some of those commonalities, and then I'm going to try to discuss, the differences between those. The 1963 and 64 289 Hypos were 5-bolt bell housing blocks. So they will not interchange with the 66, 65, or 67. It requires a different bell housing, and that's the major difference with that particular motor. The regular 271 horsepower 289 came from the factory with a cast iron 4-barrel intake and an Autolite 4-barrel carburetor. It also, what happened in that situation is after Shelby bought the motors, or got them from Ford — he didn't actually buy them, but it was given to him from Ford — what he did to change the 271 horse 289 Hypo into the Shelby motor is he changed the intake manifold, the carburetor, and also got rid of the cast iron headers that came on the Hypo and put on tri-Y headers, which were metal headers that were just a little bit better flowing than the regular K-code cast iron manifolds. And that was the main difference, and it went from 271 horsepower up to 306. So the motor we're looking at here is a 306 Shelby version. And you might be asking the question, well, how do I know, or how do I determine that this is in fact a Shelby motor? Well, I'm going to try to go from top to bottom on this motor and try to explain that. And at the end, I'll show you a verification certificate that I have for the motor that came from SAC. This motor has been verified by SAC. So let's just start at the front of the motor, and we'll cover a few things. And I'm going to start at the top, and we'll just go down to the bottom. So this is pertaining to the Shelby aspect of it only. It doesn't apply to the 271 horse K-code motors and the 2+2 Mustangs. This is the Shelby only thing. So starting with the carburetor, bear in mind this is a 1966 motor. So the date codes have to match up from the carburetor, distributor, water pump, and the balancer. I mean, all of that has to be date coded correctly for this to be matching up. So let's start with the carburetor. This is a center pivot 715 vacuum secondary Le Mans carburetor, and this is what Shelby installed on the 1966 Shelbys. So let's look at the date code here. There's some numbers to look at that will verify this. That S2MS is a Shelby number, and if you look at the 612 at the bottom, that's the build date, and that corresponds to an early 66 build date. That's how you can match this particular carburetor up with the motor. So we go on down here, and I'm going to show you a commonality between all Hypos. This dual point distributor here, it's a centrifugal advanced dual point distributor, means it has two sets of points with no vacuum advance canister. It's mechanical advance only, and if you look at the serial numbers down here, that's a C50F. That means it's a 65 build date on it, which matches with the carburetor. Okay, so let's go on further down here. I had to have this water pump. It's a rebuilt water pump that I got for it. You can see it's a C6OE water pump, but it matches the motor. This motor has never been rebuilt, so it's all still factory motor, although it has been painted. And there's a story behind that, and I'll get around to that later. All right, moving on down here to the water pump, we've got the large harmonic balancer. This happens to be a 65 C5OE balancer. This is K code, and this applies to all the K code motors from 63 all the way to 67. They will have this large balancer on them, and you can see how thick that balancer is. And if you can see the timing numbers on them right there. But this was a commonality shared along all of the Hypo motors. They had this large, thick balancer. I mean, if you're looking at, and you're saying, do I have a Hypo or not a Hypo? The first thing to look at is the balancer here. If you don't have this large balancer, you probably do not have a Hypo. Now let's go on up here. There is another build date on this motor. It's right there on the head, that 6A257. That happens to be a build date for this particular motor, and that denotes an early 66 build date. If you have the engine machined or decked, they will actually end up, if the block is decked, this number will be milled off of it, and you won't be able to see that number anymore. That's one reason. If you've got that number there and it still shows, odds are the block has never been taken apart or milled or decked. All right, let's take a look at the heads here again. I went over this in the last video, but these are Hypo heads. You can see the screw-in studs right there. You can see the spring pockets right there that the spring sits in the valve spring. Another thing over here, Hypos have 2 dots in the head right there under the 289. And let's just slowly go through this. There's a 65 date on the head right there. This number 19 through 21 also denotes a Hypo head. So that's relevant here. If you're thinking, do I have Hypo heads or not? You got to verify it by, your heads should have spring pockets like that. If they don't have the spring pockets, they're not Hypo. They should also have the screw-in studs. All right. There's one other thing down here. These are also have the little 4V on the 289 heads. But one thing to bear in mind, these heads are no different than a regular 289 except for the spring pockets and the screw-in studs. The combustion chamber size, the valve size is the same as a regular 289. All right. Let's take a look at the back of the motor here a second. There is a Shelby number, this S2MS on the intake manifold, and it has a firing order on the back side. Has the Cobra emblem on the intake manifold. So let's go down and one of the reasons, and look at the build date and the reason that I know this is a GT350 motor and how I was able to verify that. From 65 on, and I know maybe some of the 63s and 64s have it, but each Hypo block has a stamped serial number on the block. And with that number, you can match it, and it's right here. You can match that number to the VIN number on a car. What you're looking at here, and it's kind of hard to see, but that's 6R09K1765. Now I have the last 2 digits blocked off with tape because I don't give out the full serial number on it because this could be copied. So that's for security reasons. But the K number right there, every Hypo that was installed in a car has this serial number, although the numbers are going to be a little bit different. But the 6R09K, that part ought to be on all Hypo blocks. And if you want to know where that's located, it's at the front of the block on the passenger side, just above the pan rail. And the K number is right there. That single number is your most valuable number when it comes to a K code motor. This number is going to denote that, yes, this is a K number, and it's going to match the VIN number on the car that it came out of. In this particular motor, that serial number is a 65 GT350 Mustang serial number, and SAC verified that number. I called them and gave them this number, and they sent me back this sheet that verifies that this is a matching serial number to the car. So they know the car that this motor came out of. Now, just to tell you here, I already know the history of this car, and the car no longer exists because it was destroyed. In 1967, that GT350 was rolled and ended up in a junkyard. And what happened is my father, back in 1967, bought this motor out of the junkyard, and he installed it in a 1965 Sunbeam Tiger, which is sitting right there. Since 1967, that motor has been in that car all of these years up until 2020, when I removed the motor and just put it on a run stand, did a video of it and everything else. But if you look at the oil pan, this is an original Shelby GT350 oil pan, but it's been shortened. And it was shortened because it needed to be shortened to fit in that Sunbeam Tiger. So at the back of this oil pan, there's another number, and it's up under here, and I'll see if I can get it to show you it. Right there, there's the Shelby number on the back of the oil pan. Okay, now the Shelby numbers are not going to apply to the regular 271 horsepower K-code motor. But the K-code motor will have this VIN stamp number in the side of the block. That is the first thing you want to look at if you have a 2+2 Mustang or a high performance K-code Mustang in the car. If there are no stampings on the side of the block, then the block is not a Hypo block. That's really the only thing that denotes it, other than the thicker main caps that are installed in these motors, which they do have thicker main caps. This block also has a counterweight on the crankshaft that's behind the timing chain up here, but you can't see it because we don't have the cover off or the oil pan off. Now I'm just going to show you a quick date code on this block so you guys can see that the dates all match up with this block. That's a C5AE 6015-E. So this is a 1966 block, and all the parts that are on it, from the balancer, water pump, distributor, carburetor, those are all matching date code numbers. All right, so this motor, the original color of it is a dark blue, and you can see it right there. This motor was painted in 1967 before it was installed in the Sunbeam Tiger. And my dad got some overspray on the valve springs, and you can see that right there. All right, so I'm going to show you the difference between a Hypo main cap and a non-Hypo main cap right now. Although I don't have the oil pan off this block so we can see that there, I do have two blocks over here that I can demonstrate the difference between the Hypo caps and the non-Hypo caps. Over here, I've got a 1979, just stock 302, and next to it on the right is a Mexican block. It's a 1971 Mexican block, and all Mexican blocks have the larger main caps. So let's take a look at it. Here's the small main cap right here on the 79, and if we look at the main cap on the Mexican block, you can see it's a lot larger and a lot heavier duty than the one on the regular 79 302 block. The vast majority of blocks that you're going to come across are going to have these main caps. Hypo blocks will have these main caps right here, and they will look like this. Although this isn't a Hypo block, it is a Mexican block, but they had the same main caps, and that's a way that I can show you the difference in those main caps, in the size and the thickness of them. Also, Mexican blocks have this little bitty cast in spot right here that you won't see in the regular 79 block, and that's the way you can tell what a Mexican block is. They all have that little bump cast into the block. But that's a Mexican block right there with the Hypo caps. It's going to be the same caps that were on this 289 Hypo. So if you're going out to your car and you're saying, oh, do I have a Hypo or do I not have a Hypo? There are going to be a lot of things on this that you're going to have to match up before you can say, yes, I do have it or I don't have it. You got to have the large balancer. You got to have the mechanical dual point centrifugal advanced distributor. That's on all Hypos from 63 through 67. Remember, the regular Hypo will have a cast iron 4-barrel and an cast iron 4-barrel intake and an Autolite carburetor. And a Shelby will have a Holley Le Mans carburetor and an aluminum intake. And that's going to be difference between the Shelby version and the regular 289 version. Other than that, that's pretty much all the numbers that I can cover with you. I'm not the final end-all be-all authority on this, so, you know, I've been around on this earth for 50 years, have a lot of different cars, and we've owned Shelbys in the past and stuff like that, but this is how you can tell this particular block is a Shelby block. But mainly, it's the K number down there that I showed you earlier that matches that. So we know which car this engine belongs to because it matches that VIN number. So any code motor out of there, if you've got that number on the side, you can match it to the car it came out of. All right, well, I think that's all the information I can share for you now. Like I said, this motor, if you guys want to see it running on an engine stand, it's on my channel, and you just click on that. There are probably 2 or 3 different videos of this motor actually running. I may mount it back on the run stand again here and do some more running videos of it. But that's all the information I think I can share for you right now. Just comment or ask questions on the video if you want more information. But these are some of the things that you can identify on a Hypo motor. The Hypo motor, no matter whether it's a Shelby or a regular 271 Hypo block, it should have the dual point distributor. It should have the large balancer down here. It should have the Hypo heads and all those little markings that I showed you, the 2 dots, the rocker studs, the valve springs. That's a commonality between all of these engines. And it should have a VIN number stamped on the block down here on the front passenger side. Without that VIN number, you're not looking at a Hypo block. Now, somebody might have bought a service block or had a replacement in their car, but the original Hypos had a VIN number stamped on the block right here that you could match up to the car it came out of. And remember, the dates on the Hypo blocks are between 63 and 67. After that, you're not dealing with a Hypo block. They only manufactured them between those dates. The 5-bolt blocks were manufactured in 63 and 64, and the 6-bolt blocks were 65 to 67. So if anybody has some other information, feel free to chime in or comment below. But that's pretty much what I know about it from this point. All right, guys, thanks for looking.